Home. Good evening. You're welcome to Ghana Tonight. I'm Kemini Amano.
And I am Alfred Okanse. We're live on News Hub here at Desawe Kanda, also live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. Coming up tonight here on your Election Command Center, we bring you a wrap of the campaigns and rallies of the two leading political parties, the governing New Patriotic Party and the opposition National Democratic Congress. We ask the question, will the campaign rallies deliver votes in the next 48 hours? Stay with us on your Election Command Center. We'll bring you details of that, plus some analysis, reactions, and also your views and opinions, because there's a question on our social media handles to that effect. We'll bring you detail of that shortly here on Ghana Tonight. Kemini?
What a night it has been, Alfred, and indeed, many more nights like this to come. But listen, be a part of the conversation. We're streaming live on Facebook, on YouTube, on x.com. We are also live on 392.7 FM and 3news.com. If you'd like to interact with us, with Alfred and myself, the hashtag to use is Ghana Tonight. It'll bring your messages to the top.
Absolutely. Let's settle for Ghana Briefs.
The leader and founder of the new force, Nana Kwame Bediako, has accused the Electoral Commission of failing to provide accreditation to his agents to monitor the elections. Nana Kwame Bediako said the situation has made it virtually impossible for him to have representation at all polling centers.
Discrimination, but we're also being cheated, undermined, and restricted. We have managed to put together almost 40,000 polling agents, only to find out that we have to write a letter for every single one of them, 40,000 people, in a space of 48 hours before we get accreditations. And people are going to the regional EC offices and picking up their accreditations without a letter.
Convener of the ECOWAS Elders Forum, Goodluck Jonathan, has urged presidential candidates contesting the December 7 election to accept the outcome of the polls. Addressing the media during a courtesy call on the Election Security Task Force, the former Nigerian president said the candidates should consider the election as a game in which only one person can win.
For elections, only one person will win. So whenever you are going for election, you should be ready to lose or to win. There are some people who feel they must win, and if they don't win, then the heavens will come down. No, heavens will not come down. So we plead with the politicians to take election as a game. It's not a war. And if you lose, maybe some other time you will win.
The Ghana Coalition Against Galamsey has secured a significant step in the fight against illegal mining, with significant presidential candidates signing a pact to eliminate the menace. This agreement, which comes ahead of the 2024 elections, commits candidates to take decisive action against illegal mining practices, also known as Galamsey, should they assume office.
How many of the poor people can buy an excavator or rent an excavator or buy and manufacture a chamfan? So the middle class, we have also checked that, but that stops. It stops now. It is the reason why we ask the politicians, the presidential candidates, those who are likely to become president on the 7th of January, that they need to sign a pact with us, a social contract that says that they are going to preserve our lives.
The state is set to file new charges against the founder and leader of Alive Chapel International, Prophet Elisha Salifu Amwakon, his wife Muha, and a domestic worker, Linda Bempa. The trio are on a 50,000 Ghana cedi bail after they pleaded not guilty to a charge of permitting an unlicensed person to drive.
Well, that Ghana Brief there for you. If you just joined us, you're just in time for the rest of the program. I'm Kemeni Amano, and tonight I'm here with Alfred Okanse, or Alfred Okanse is here with me. Anyway, let's get into the crux of the matter today. For the political parties who have been wrapping up campaigns for the December 7th polls. Now, while Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia led the NPP's gathering at the University of Ghana Sports Directorate Park in Legon for what they described as the Possibilities Victory Rally, the John Dramani Mahama-led National Democratic Congress gathered at the Zurak Park in Medina for their final rally. Let's bring you some sights and sounds from those events.
Enti ya ntiye na me pesa isi ebusa omo eye den na MPP enya printing plates na ye de printing ballot papers any registers are omo printing omo ade ene ameno ka say ye say hohoi ya che ka biom ballot papers ne enyoma wom ena omo ya say omo beje ka no it is our station of sawo hohoi we release this aka na Nyabe adom ni eba ye ne obedi enti o de cheka no na njina ho a e wo ho golokwate ye se e wo golokwate e no ma che saka no ezu enti na twato mesre ya bambo for ya police for any electoral commission for monhu Ghana mobo na ejuma o meyi mu se monkoye no Yes, Remo, Munya Mujumano Frenchem, Senebeya, Niagana for Peno, and no Enebeya home. Entimis Remo, Omwa Omabesha Batonoso, Omoshe no Munya Mujuma ye. Memenda Yako, Obia Shechiniano, Melko Kase, oh, Sheshe number 8, because a battle of Kratano, Yentro number Bia or so. Enti me obe hwehwe ani chinie no na wo chinie na wo de kokromoti na wo de abo enkrimu na wo de team ballot paper no so ezu.
Well, John Dramani Mahama there, he's the NDC's presidential candidate at that final rally in Medina. Essentially, he's been appealing to the Electoral Commission to do the right thing by delivering a fair, free and credible election on December 7th. He's also called on his supporters and pretty much anyone listening, Alfred, to go out there and choose the NDC. Look out for the umbrella. That's what he said in that soundbite we've heard. But, you know, it's been a long night, particularly for John Dramani Mahama, as he said at the rally, Alfred. True. He talked about the fact that he's just coming off the campaign trail to the rally, and you could tell from his face how tired he looked. But what stood out for you this night, Alfred?
Well, and just starting off from where you ended, he spent 6 days in the Ashanti region, and it was strategic because this is the stronghold of the MPP, and that's why Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia returned to the Ashanti region after John Dramani Mahama started that 6-day tour of the region. In fact, the president also spent 5 days there last week prior to Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia returning to the Ashanti region this week. He had spent 15 days in the region. So that tells you that they know that the Ashanti region is one of the major deciders in this particular election, and then also the Greater Accra region, because per the numbers that we got from the Electoral Commission now, the Greater Accra region has the highest number of registered voters. Absolutely. That obviously tells you why they both also decided to hold their rallies in the region. Indeed. And in strategic constituencies as well, beside all the other things that you take into consideration for the Greater Accra region being a swing region that has always also given us an indication of who becomes president just until 2020, that even though John Mahama won the Greater Accra region, he wasn't declared president of the Republic of Ghana. Many say that's an outlier. But then again, we'll see how the trends would either repeat itself or would have another outlier in the 2024 election. But the message was quite clear. even though he wrapped up and summarized a number of the manifesto promises, it kept on hammering on the matter of free, fair and transparent election because of some of the issues that he talked about. What is clear is that the NDC is going into this election with their eyes wide open than what we saw in 2020. Kemini.
Indeed. And Alfred, you know, John Dramani Mahama was not the only one who mounted that podium or stage in Medina. There was also his running mate, Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman, the professor. She had also spoken about women. And we've known that it would appear that the presidential candidate has ceded issues around women to her. But more importantly, also telling us that really issues around women are important to the NDC. You recall from that manifesto, they go as much as talk about fertility issues with women. And you know, it's one of those things that no matter how many roads you construct, you cannot give fertility to somebody. And all around the world, even in developed countries, people talk about fertility a lot.
That's right.
You get it. There are places where, in the US, for instance, where people are asking that fertility issues be put on their health insurance. And so it's important that, for me, that John Dramani Mahama brings that into the fray, that Jane Nana Opoku-Agyeman brings that into the fray. But also important to this issue is the empowerment of women, the empowerment of young people. Jane Nana Opoku-Agyeman spoke about on the stage. Let's take a listen. We'll come back to the discussion.
So ya bofra ya wo preko vaccine na ya asem. Wa ya bofra wo primary school fiancy and winya book da. Enti nim de be na abofra no odi ko na nim. Na ne nua pani so awako do secondary school no. And now o school 3 weeks and now ba fie 3 months. And no ye kosua o hemfa. Enti mo hu say we ya abofra o, we ya bebu no, we ya pani mo, obi enya ne de. Near ya one penny for no more. And I say, Ja, only me say, ne pension, no, I was said the abbey. And to OCS and the Sika Kakra, baby, I fell cross me who they Jamie Hodachi. Okoya when you know, yeah, Obiso be a friend or haircut. One more crown, one day, I heard Hawkesy. One more soon or my coin parcel. As I said, you'll be a Yana dear. Yes, I have to my dear Yanto, say if you are Yanto. Nani, you know, say I'm a fra, say a babu no tiffy. Say ya in Penifua, woman Sanka Musicano. Sanko for you know, some of us put them in better for my shabibia. A whole nabbe who say, a man and a breakfast. Me animal mamma. A man or a fan. You to know a hay fan. I'm afraid the woman in her mother. As some four back open your dijamo. And it does so. Then it does so your best answer, Memenda.
Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman is running mate of the NDC. Alfred, you heard the good old professor talk about women's economic empowerment, and you know, just pick a bite out of that, and then we move on to we switch camp.
Absolutely, and you were right about the emphasis on women by both parties, at least for the MPP and the NDC. We see the same emphasis also placed on the female factor by the Movement for Change, and then also the New Force, Nana Kwame and so on. But if you look at the two, MPP and the NDC, you see a number of promises targeted at women. The NDC is talking about a women's bank. The MPP is also talking about a certain scheme to help women to be able to set up businesses with loans that have very flexible payment periods with lower interest rates and so on. That they would have to pay. So clearly, there's an understanding of what women need and the kind of support that they need as we're going into the election. But guess what? The NDC, if you look at it as well, have a lot to look out for when it comes to Jane Nana Opoku-Agyeman, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman, because if they win, she then becomes the first female vice president of the Republic of Ghana. And that's one advantage as well that you cannot discount with the ticket of John Mahama and Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman. And that's been the appeal of the NDC to the women groups in this country.
Absolutely. And Alfred, that very point you made there, we had General Mosquito, Johnson Asiedu Nketia, make the same point on the stage. And you know, let's remind ourselves that in this country, in this Fourth Republic, the NDC has been known to empower women. We know about the 31st December women's. It may not, women's movement. It may not be a core and critical part of the NDC at the moment, but we know how it began, its influence in the early politics of the Fourth Republic, and where, it ended with the NDC. But let's take the conversation now to Mustafa Gbandi, who's Deputy General Secretary of the NDC. Mustafa, it's good to have you here. Good evening to you. I suppose it's been a very long night for you.
Well, so good evening, and thank you for having me.
Very well. Let's talk about the messaging of this final rally. What do you suppose your supporters and any floating voters, undecided voters at this point walked away with?
Let me start from the top. I think that basically, this evening, the die have been casted, and I see hope left in the eyes and the faces of Ghanaians. I see restitution coming up. I also see people knowing that there's a future for this country, which starts on Sunday or Monday. I see teeming youth who refreshes with the new energy that is coming up as they get themselves into the wind of change that is blowing. Naturally, 8-year cycle has caught up with the MPP. And so Ghanaians are fed up. Ghanaians believe that enough is enough. Ghanaians believe that let's try something new. Quite apart from that, I think my supporters across the country who have observed the iconic end of campaign rally remain charged, vigilant, and ready to defend every single vote that is going to be casted in favor of the NDC. Indeed, one of our key issues between now and Saturday is how to ensure that we protect every single vote in the midst of heightened rate of perpetuated or attempted perpetration of electoral violence by persons within government and to the benefit of the MPP. You've heard the flag bearer speak about fake ballot papers. You've also heard of a very ignoramus claimed national security, regional security letter. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Mustafa.
Regional security letter signed by a regional minister, and it's very laughable and an expression of ignorance, because the Regional Security Council is not the same as Election Task Force. And ignorantly, the regional minister, who is an appointee of the president, who himself has proprietary interest in the election, constituted a regional security meeting, which includes the military, includes the NIB, includes national security, signed the letter and outlining rules of election without recourse to Election Task Force. For me, it is not by mistake. It is just an expression of people who are desperate, people who pretend not to be knowledgeable when they are committing a crime behind it. And this is why Ghanaians are very suffocated with this government,
I see,
stressed with this government, tired with this government, in the face of high-level political crimes and corruption.
Very well. So
that is what I think this evening was released to all of us.
I see. Mustafa, so do you see that at the end of tonight, you convinced those undecided voters? Do you think that's what they walked away with?
There is nothing to convince. Ghanaians have made up their mind. I have been moving around the corridors of this country. You see even students waving at NDC flags. You see people jubilating as if the vote has already been casted. I've never seen it before.
I see.
The level of interest and commitment Ghanaians have shown towards this change to ensure that there's nothing of President Akufo-Addo left in this governance. The level of investment that have gone into this election to ensure that the MPP goes into opposition. Even people within the MPP itself and members within President Akufo-Addo's government who still have conscience.
Very well.
Support they have given towards ensuring that their party goes into position is unprecedented and something I have never seen before.
Indeed, Mustafa, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much for talking to us. Mustafa Gbandi is Deputy General Secretary of the NDC. We've been talking on the back of that final rally, and Alfred, you heard him. Basically, again, the same position that those who climbed that stage have made, that it's time for the MPP to go, it's time for the NDC to come in.
Indeed, rightly so, but the NPP doesn't think so. They don't think and agree.
Not at all.
It's time for them to go, and that's why they are seeking to do something that's unprecedented in our political history as a country. They are seeking to break the 8 with Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia as the flag bearer of the MPP. And if you look at our electoral history, they are seeking to do the impossible, but that's why they go with the tagline that it is possible over the period. And that is obviously left to the Ghanaian people to speak to that effect.
Indeed.
But if you see behind me, this trend graph and Kemeni tells us a clear idea of the kind of task that the MPP has before them, and reason why many were asking questions as to whether they would have the mettle to be able to break the 8. They say it is possible for them to do that. This is what Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia said today at the University of Ghana Sports Complex, the stadium, when they had their final rally.
When we came into office, Ghana did not have a working address system. You had to use landmarks by the tree, by the blue house for directions in many places. Today, we have implemented the digital property address system, and you can find anywhere in Ghana, any location in Ghana. In the area of healthcare, we have seen dramatic improvement, major investment in health infrastructure, hospitals. We are seeing major hospitals that we are working on, even excluding Agenda 111. And the President has started commissioning the Agenda 111, and I will continue to commission them all the way into next year.
So he talks about the Agenda 111, Kemeni, and he says it's going to continue because the Agenda 111 hospitals, as we've been detailing since the last 6 months on this manifesto check with Dennis, they were not going to be able to complete it. A number of the functionaries within this government conceded that they cannot complete the 111 hospital projects that they set on their minds and also an objective for them to achieve. That's what Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia has been talking about. That's one of the many things that he spoke about as an appeal to the voters. But he's on a path that even though some political watchers say it is impossible, he says that it is indeed possible. We're going to get into the trend shortly, but we have a conversation on the back of
and you know, Alfred, just to bring light to the matter, today I've been reading how President Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo will be inaugurating some Agenda 111 hospitals. I mean, the question for a lot of Ghanaians then is, why did we have to wait until the very last minute? If we could do this, people could have used this in the last 4 years, and that didn't happen for them. Now, I mean, there's a lot more to comment when it comes to what we heard on the side of the NPP. But how about we have a quick chat on the back of both events that have taken place today? Professor Kobi Mensah is a political marketing strategist at the University of Ghana Business School. He's joining us for his thoughts on these final rallies. Prof, good evening.
Kemeni, good evening. Good to hear your voice. Good to see you.
Yeah, pleasure seeing you too. Do you think that these candidates, these political parties, sold their message tonight?
Well, of course, I mean, I think that they had done quite a lot of work, across the country, selling their messages, and they crowned it with two big rallies, almost around the same vicinity, close by my university, of course, one in my university, one just across the road. And you could see the excitement, both camps, the NDC camp, the MPP camp, all of them, hailing their heroes, hailing their presidential candidate, as well as the party leadership. I think that all in all, they've done well. They have actually sort of packaged their political products, very well to the Ghanaian people. It is yet to see whether Ghanaian people have really taken into consideration what they had been told in the election, in the vote. And so we'll wait for the D-Day.
And let's talk about the way and manner in which the final message was packaged. Obviously, these final rallies are critical to the campaign and the electoral process. But you watch the NDC, you watch the NPP's, rallies. What are your thoughts on how the messages were packaged and delivered?
Okay. I think that first, let me take the NDCs because they finished very early. You could see that, they sort of obviously allowed, key members of the campaign team to speak. And then finally, the presidential candidate wrapped it up. Now, it was quite, what do you call, succinct, I think, because it didn't actually last that long as the NPPs. Now, you would hear the NDC people actually sort of wrap up with each of the policies that they have actually proposed, and especially highlighting what they call the oral operation, recover or loot. And you could imagine the drama that actually came with it. Obviously, Basintali dressed, who was referred in that particular policy, dressed in a manner that he's actually ready to actually, sort of recoup or loot, as they say. And so you could feel the atmosphere, and you could feel the summation of the policy areas that they highlighted. If you look at the MPP, they went a step further. I think that Baumia took a step down to, I think even before him, Kennedy Japan had come to sort of zone in into Kufuor's era, and then, of course, to Nanado's era. I think one thing that you could take notice of is they are overly reliant on the free SHS. I thought that it was very, sort of very surprising to see because, you would think that they would zone in on exactly the campaign message, which was the digitalization. But then one thing that actually rings through all in all for the MPP is this, going back to the free SHS, I suppose is as a result of what they have actually garnered from the campaign trail. They realized that perhaps the free SHS would do them a lot of good than going back to, their own, campaign theme, which is the digitalization.
I see. But I mean, notwithstanding the importance of the final rally that, I alluded to earlier, the opposite side of that will be whether or not the voter is listening or paying attention to anything at this point. What do you see from your experience?
I think that the final rallies are very much for the faithfuls. If you understand how political parties work, you have to whip up your base. Otherwise, if you get any disenchanted base or if you get any kind of apathy, you are actually out of the game. And so final rallies very much is about a jamboree, it's about a fanfare to whip up the base. I mean, if you look at the two political parties, clearly it is very important for them to get their base, going into the election. I mean, giving them the huge mandate so that they can actually top up with those of the people who they call the floating voters. if you do not whip up the base, certainly you are not actually, going to secure the vote. And don't forget, rallies are not where you ask questions. Rallies, they don't ask questions there. So the political parties are at liberty to sort of say anything. And, they could actually go on and on to actually talk about policies that even they haven't realized. But then they will say it as if it had been realized. You wouldn't be able to verify because obviously you are one, kind of geographic area. They are talking about maybe something that they've done in very far away, let's say Tumu, for example. The people in Tumu can't also say that, well, this is not happening here. So they use that particular platform to sort of wrap up and then to pump up the base for them to go and vote by saying everything that could actually get them energized.
I see. Now the campaigns have wrapped up. The voting itself will be on Saturday. Let me put you on the spot, Prof. Who's had the best campaign?
It's a straightforward NDC. And the reason why I'm saying that is that, of course, if you look at the NDC's campaign, it's very much diversified. You have, at some point, a youth manifesto, and the youth of the NDC is actively activated. I mean, the kind of show that they put up, I am sure that majority of the people, especially the youth in MPP, perhaps wish they could have actually done so. It is almost like the MPP youth were actually missing in the game. Again, if you look at the NDC side, you had a very activated women campaign group. They had a women manifesto. It never happened before in this country. But of course, if you look at the MPP's campaign, they had the money. There was a lot of energy from Dr. Baumia's team going through all the 275 constituencies. That is remarkable. But of course, it is not all about resources. It's about how effective the campaign was put up. Even when you look at the final rally, for example, if you look at the stage, anybody who's actually into PR, you could see the difference between the NPP's stage and the NDC stage. One is very clean, very well, kind of managed. The other were quite a lot of people on the stage, very busy. And I was thinking, why was somebody actually not taking control of the NPP stage as it used to, be?
You must have really watched closely and very observant for all that you saw.
Definitely, that's the work that we do, so we have to be able to monitor them and to be able to be fair in the analysis. Very well, Prof.
I appreciate you talking to us. Thank you so much. Professor Kobi Mensah is a political marketing strategist at the University of Ghana Business School. And Alfred, while Prof was talking, I was just remembering some of the things that I had seen from the NPP rally that, stuck out to me. Besides, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia reiterating some of the things that we had already heard from him and in his campaign, as did the NDC candidates as well. But when President Akufo-Addo took the stage and then he talks about vote for Dr. Bawumia because he will come and continue what I have started. I was thinking, you just gave it to the opponent, because the opponent has been talking about how a vote for, Dr. Bawumia is a continuation of a Nanado agenda. Oh, I was just wondering, where is that communication going?
Well, you could also flip it around this way.
You could.
Governance is in our constitution. Governance is a continuum, but we always see that successive governments tend to take a detour from continuing the projects of their predecessors, with the explanation that those projects do not fit into their manifesto or their development plan or the blueprints that they won the election with. But think about it, Kemini, no president, no political party comes to power and execute development with their own resources. President Akufo-Addo, with all the projects that he's commissioned, the former President John Mahama, with all the projects that they commissioned, they did not finance it with their personal money.
At all.
Right? It is our taxes, it is our resources that they preside over and also provide leadership in executing those projects. But then again, we've seen over the period that there are so many uncompleted projects dotted across the country that is costing the taxpayer so much. So if you say that the only person that he believes would come and continue the things that he started, well, you could say he didn't distinguish whether good or bad. But when again, you would want to give him the benefit of doubt and say that it is projects that he started that he is going to have Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia continue. But I have heard, and I'm sure that as we have followed this campaign of both political parties, the NDC, John Mahama, has also said that he is going to continue some of the projects as well that this administration has started.
Right.
Taking cognizance of the fact that these uncompleted projects, it's a sin that those political parties, whoever wins, should not continue. They shouldn't continue committing that sin.
But really, listen, in order for any of that to happen, someone has got to win the elections. What are the trends telling us, Alfred?
Well, guess what? And that's what I was saying. There are a number of things that are at play here when it comes to some historic moments and people seeking to make history, or the political parties seeking to make history for that matter. Apart from the NDC fielding a president or a former president who is seeking a comeback as their flag bearer, and then also seeking to make history again with the flag bearer of this same president seeking a comeback being the female and seeking to be the first female vice president of the Republic of Ghana in our political history. You would also have the MPP seeking to break the 8, apart from what that historic objective they have as well. Guess what, Kemeni? We have 111 parliamentary candidates who are independent. We've never had those numbers in our political history. 111 independent parliamentary candidates dotted across the country. And we have a chunk of them in the strongholds of the MPP. So that's a conversation we're going to be having in the coming days as well. How that would impact on the MPP's chances in some of these strongholds that they have, the Ashanti region especially. Now, apart from that, we have over 800 parliamentary candidates all put together from the political parties and all the independent that we're adding up. So this election is giving us a lot of historic moments and a lot to think about. If Adonko had not died, we're going to have 13 presidential candidates on that presidential ballot paper. That was going to also be the highest number we've ever had, up from the 12 that we had in 2020. And beyond that as well, we are seeing 4 independent presidential candidates. That's the highest we've had since 1992. So this election, there's a lot to look out for. And there's a lot of history at play that we're going to be capturing as we go on to understand the context and how things are going to play out in the coming days. But look at the task ahead of the MPP. Take a look at this. From 1992, right? Every party that has won elections after 8 years, they bow out and the Ghanaian people say bye-bye to you. And then we seek another party to come into power. So that 8-year cycle has always been that we go on. In the year 2000, we saw the MPP coming to power on the ticket of John Ejekum Kufuor, won 2004. In 2008, that election that saw the MPP go to primaries with some 17 persons who sought to lead the party as their flag bearer. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo emerged as the flag bearer of the MPP in the 2008 election after that compromise position that Alan Chemanting took after that very crucial election of the flag bearer elections in the University of Ghana, Legon. Now, guess what? The first round, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo won, but not with the 50% plus 1 that is needed to win the presidential election in this country. Coming up against the late John Evans Mills, we had to go for a runoff. Then the NDC won the runoff. So you can safely say that the closest the NPP has come to breaking the 8 was in 2008, when Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, although won the first round, but did not get 50 plus 1. He got 49.3% as against John Evans Mills, the late 47.8. So would you say that the 2008 showing that we saw Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo put up is one that they believe that Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia can also give because he partnered Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo in that election in 2008? Or it's for the politics of Ghana to decide. And indeed, it's for the people who are watching us here to decide as well and what they're going to take into consideration going into this particular election. Because if you want to look at the history and the trends, you cannot take out the individuals, the candidates, and their political strength, their stature, the ability, the qualities that they bring to the candidature as well. Look, for whatever it happened with Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo over the last almost 8 years as president, you cannot also discount his political impact over the period. In fact, his political history dates as far back as 1970. He joins the People's Movement for Freedom and Justice. He was just in his early 20s. He's coming from a family of politicians. He knows this. Then, moved back to 1995, he led that Kwame Preko demonstration. Then, he contested at the first flag bearership race in 1998, before the 2000 election, with John Ejekon Kufuor.
Yeah.
J. Kufuor won that flag bearership in 1998. He was appointed as the Attorney General Minister of Justice, the
when
Foreign
Kufuor
Affairs
came to
Minister.
power.
Within that 8-year period that Kufuor was in power, 2008, he won the flag bearership to contest on the ticket of the MPP. You cannot take that away from him. And so you can understand why that impact in 2008 was quite telling in the first round. But fast forward in 2016, he's won the most highest victory in the presidential election in this country with that margin of victory of over 1 million votes between him and John Dramani Mahama. Would you say that Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia also has the clout, the impact, the wherewithal, the mettle, the strength to be able to deliver the same performance that the MPP should put up in the year 2008? Well, that's for the people looking into the crystal ball to tell us. But the likes of Tony Edo at some point said that in 2016, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia was the Achilles heels for the NDC because of the economic prowess that he was presented with, at the time by Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. What we have seen over the period in the impact of the economy and Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is another thing as well. And going into this election, the economy is the biggest consideration for the people. So would you say that looking into your pocket and seeing how you're feeling, and then also having the economist on the ticket, it's a decision that you have to take. But then again, take a look at the performance of the parties in 2020, juxtapose that in 2008. The decision is yours.
Absolutely, absolutely, Alfred. And listen, that 2008 election that you mentioned brings to mind how fascinating, action-packed, and suspenseful that election was. So I want us to talk about, the 2008 election a little bit when we come back. Don't go away. Welcome back. This is still Ghana Tonight live on TV3 and 392.7 FM. I'm Kemini Amano. I'm here with Alfred Okanse. Alfred, listen, some people online have been asking about whether or not the running mate of the NPP was at the final rally. And I'm thinking, of course he was.
Yeah.
He was. I mean, we may not have seen him on television because, again, a few things happened on the ground, but he was. He was there with his, his number one man on the tickets.
True.
To sell their message
So
last minute, right?
Dr. Matthew Pokumbepe was there.
He was.
He mounted the stage. He spoke, right? But I think that's when the connection went off.
Absolutely. The systems went off at the University of Ghana Park over there. But we were talking about, we'll talk about the final rallies because we've got one more interview to go, but we're talking about the 2008 election that led to that runoff on December 28 between Akufo-Addo and John Evans Atta Mills. And on January 2nd, that's when we had the decider. True. If you remember, that's when Tyne
constituency,
indeed became a really important, decider for that election. And for me, is that moment that General Mosquito rose to popularity, to fame that he enjoys today, in my opinion, right? Because it was more or less his home turf. And when Tyne was delivered, it won them the election in the 2008 runoff. Yeah. Fantastic stuff.
Absolutely.
Very suspenseful election. We can't go any further because, they're practically telling us to move on from the election. So from the 2008 election. let's come back. Let's come back to...
yes, indeed. And maybe it's running up with the
final rally.
Latest. That's the Global Info Analytics making projections into what they have been looking at, surveying. In fact, polling over 2,500 of the people they've been doing over the last almost 2 years, and cumulatively close to 20,000 people over the last 2 years they've been polling. They say 50.4%. In the worst case scenario, they're projecting 50.4 for John Dramani Mahama amongst the people who they polled, and not the generality of the 18.7 million Ghanaian eligible voters. 43 for Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, and then Nana Kwame Bediako and Alan will share the rest. And in the best case scenario, they project 54.1 for JDM and also 39.8 for Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. But as I always say, it is on the D-Day. What happens in the booth is one that you and I cannot poll. But the MPP believes in their candidate. The NDC also believes in their candidate. What's up for grabs? Kemini?
Well, listen, let's have a conversation on the back of what you have just shared with our viewers. Musa Dankwa is Executive Director for Global Info Analytics. We'll focus this conversation somewhere in between those polls and the final rallies that we have seen. Musa, good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Musa, you saw those final rallies. Let's compare that with your numbers as you have seen those huge crowds, the mammoths, the sea of supporters who went there for the NPP rally and the NDC final rallies. And my question then to you is, does it give you reason to believe that perhaps the polls could be changing?
Thank you very much for having me, Alfred. The answer is no. No, in the sense that the data has shown us that a lot of people already made up their mind, and very, very few are yet to be convinced by the campaigns. So I wouldn't expect these huge rallies at the end to add to numbers, rather than just to symbolize that the campaign has come to an end.
I see. So Musa, it would appear that you stand by the fact that the persons who were surveyed in your polls past, particularly the final one, will not change their minds.
When it comes to elections, as I mentioned earlier, or in the course of our discussions some times back, unless there is a scandal around a candidate, unless something unknown about the candidate's services towards the end, that tend to sway the vote to one side. Doesn't change much.
I see. Mr. Dankwa, I'm afraid we'll have to leave our conversation here. We're out of time. And you were talking to Kemini, not Alfred. But
he's hearing two voices.
I know. He must have got confused about that one. But thank you so much, Mr. Dankwa, for talking to us. Mr. Dankwa, who I just spoke to, is Executive Director for Global Info Analytics. And Alfred, he says that he doesn't think that in the next 48 hours anything will change unless there's something scandalous that is happening.
I mean, you hear the debate about the role that polls really play in our elections and as to whether our democracy has matured to the point where someone can openly tell you that, look, I'm going to go this direction, and it is in truth and reality what the person is going to do when the person is in the booth or by himself, him or her, by herself, on with the ballot paper and who they're going to thumbprint, as to whether we mature to that point. Because people still have this sense of being victimized and so on, and they don't even trust the secrecy of polls. Because most of them are transited from physical polling, as in going to a constituency and asking people physically, to telephone polls, so that if I call you and I say, you know what, I'm from this organization, I'm doing this poll, I don't need your name, I don't need any form of information, but I want to know who you're voting for. That's some level of secrecy, because I'm not seeing you. But then again, people still are a bit skeptical about data protection,
Indeed.
You know, and so on. But there's some degree of certainty. That's why he talks about the margin of error that they put to these polls. It gives a certain direction. And we can only wait for the next 48 hours.
Absolutely. And you know, even now, we perhaps, I don't know, we could count less than 48 hours if we were going by the clock of the Electoral Commission. We're probably, you know, gone into our 30 hours or less by now. But the voter, you, me, Alfred, we have the final decision, right?
Yeah, absolute. And that's why we're calling on you. Join us tomorrow at exactly 6 p.m. here on your Election Command Center. We have election night. Kevin, myself, Martin Esiedudate will start the journey to December 7, tomorrow, December 6th at 6 p.m.
6
How about
p.m.
that? We have a date.
In the meantime, we'll have to say goodbye to you. I have a restful night. We'll see you here 6 p.m.
6 p.m.
We'll be back.
Certainly. Good night.
I almost said I'm Alfred Okanse, but I'm Kemeni Amano.
It doesn't spoil the fish. Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Ghana Tonight is brought to you by
Flamingo Paint. Superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage, simply superior.
La